Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film The Creator. Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for The Creator?
Sure. Against the backdrop of a war between humans and robots with artificial intelligence, a former soldier finds the secret weapon, a robot in the form of a young child.
Okay. And let's start off with our one-sentence summaries for The Creator. What was yours?
Okay, so what I realized before we started recording is that my initial one-sentence summary was maybe spoilery. Well, not maybe spoilery. It was spoilery. So
Okay.
I very quickly wrote another one-sentence summary.
Okay.
So this is my non-spoiler one-sentence summary. Is freedom for all too much to ask?
Interesting. Oh, I'm now very intrigued your thoughts about this movie. I think you've got some
Yeah.
the
I'm
thing that
just trying to create intrigue here. That's my
Yes.
whole goal. This is
Yes.
the setup to keep you listening.
I am very intrigued.
Great. Mission accomplished.
Well, I'm now doubly intrigued because I also need to know what the original summary that you had written was, but we'll do that one after we do our spoiler.
Yes.
So 2 layers of intrigue happening here.
Mm-hmm.
I
Love it. That is what we try to do here. Just keep the intrigue flowing.
My one-sentence summary is not a sentence, but it is
Oh.
Blade Runner's knockoff.
I love it.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yes, short, sweet, to the point. Okay,
Yeah, it's great.
let's peel back layer 1 of intrigue. Sarah, what were your thoughts about The Creator? Initial thoughts, high level.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this movie. I think visually and auditorially it is stunning. The visuals, the sounds, phenomenal. The way that this is constructed to just like be a feast for your senses is lovely. And I really like the approach that Gareth Edwards and the entire team took in incorporating so many different looks to this very futuristic society. So there's just a lot that I think is so good in that regard. But the story and the characters just didn't work for me. I found this movie to be very tropey, and while I'm interested in the world that was built, I didn't connect with the characters that much, and I didn't connect with the the story as much as I wanted to. And I've connected with other stories that have done similar things as this better previously. So I'm very torn because there's such an incredible production value and the execution on that is great, but I really found the script and the story to be lacking. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag for me.
Interesting. We'll have an interesting discussion, I think. This feels half-baked to me, is my thoughts about it. Not just in those aspects
Ooh.
that you've shared around the screenwriting, the character development. I think that leaves a lot to be desired. But I think that the perspectives and views about AI, which is incredibly prominent right now in our society and culture and in the discourse, I think it's a little thin too. And as I was leaving the theater, I felt just like a strong reaction to this movie, and I was trying to pinpoint exactly what it was. I think there's some aspects of there's just some views about the future of AI that I fundamentally disagree with, but I think there's some things that this movie does with weaving in positioning the AI and the simulants in this movie and using some of these like dynamics between our countries and cultures and history and kind of weaving those two things together in a way that creates feelings of empathy and connection to some of the uh, specimen groups and people groups in this movie, but I think it's actually like a kind of a slightly manipulative way to get us to care about this perspective that maybe the filmmakers have about the future of AI. And it feels a little cheap to me to use that as a device to try and get us to be on board with this view of a specific type of technology and the way that it will be used. I'm talking pretty vaguely here because I don't want to give too much away, but I think that aspect really irked me after leaving the theater and like really thinking about this a little bit more. I will say, I think that the aspects that I loved about this movie are some of the world building little moments that we saw. And we can talk about some of the specifics, but I thought there were some interesting like visual ideas and ways that this world works and the rules and the systems of how these uh, things operate together that I thought was pretty interesting perspectives and just kind of makes you reflect upon what how we relate to our technology today. So I think those little vignettes and those little moments were pretty insightful. But on the whole, I think that there's this idea of um, robots and AI fighting humanity and what that are the stakes of the world being at hand, and then the way that this movie takes a certain stance on all of that. I just thought was a little bit of a cheap way to get us to care about or see a picture or vision or a future for how we and AI work together. So yeah, it's I think it's always interesting when any uh, writer, creator, um, someone that has a perspective and is sharing their perspective on AI comes forth with a viewpoint. And I think the movie, the creator has like a pretty clear viewpoint, and I always find it fascinating to. It opens up so much interesting conversations around the topic of AI, which is always fun. So that's why I was excited for this conversation. I think it'll be really interesting.
Well, and I watch movies in a weird way. We all know
Hmm.
this. I I was not interested in the AI piece of it, like at
Mm.
all. Uh, so I managed to locate some other themes that I've been thinking about ever since I saw this movie, other than AI. So I'm very interested to see the things
Fun.
that didn't sit well with you, and then maybe sharing some of my themes that I
Yeah.
pulled out of nowhere, and see if I am the only one.
I love it. I'm so excited. Yeah. Well, this is gonna be a really fun conversation. I think it'll be hard to talk about this movie without diving into spoilers. So this is your spoiler alert. If you haven't seen The Creator, it is available out in theaters, which is awesome. That we still can have these like really interesting ideas and movies that are being put out there that aren't big budget, big action, you know, uh, IP pieces. So really exciting, honestly, that this is a theater release. A movie like this I would have expected to be more of a hit straight to streaming, but I think that this is exciting that it's out there. So I recommend checking it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. Okay, Sarah, I'm intrigued to hear about some of the themes that you have pulled out from this movie.
Okay, so the basically the two big themes that I was thinking about for good chunks of the movie was number one, American imperialism, uh, especially when it was all of these, American military figures then going in and destroying this rural Asian population. Like, there's been a lot of shady military things that the US has been involved in
Mhm.
over the decades. And so that was a very difficult thing to watch, just knowing the history of the US intervening in other nations and then seeing that play out in this futuristic retelling again. So that was one thing that I couldn't stop thinking about. And then the other thing was uh just the way that whiteness has a way of creating distance between other groups. So in this movie, uh, the white general and colonel use a black man to then go and infiltrate this Asian population and cause harm to them. And so I think I wouldn't have been aware of those kind of like dynamics happening, I don't think, if I hadn't been more aware of maybe some of the issues between the black community and the Asian community that I feel like have come to light more in
Mm,
recent years.
mhm.
And so the whole time I was really thinking about how destructive that can be, and how sometimes white people in power and whiteness just in general can pit other groups against each other in order to maintain power. And I feel like that's what we see in this movie. I don't know if that was intentional, but I could not stop thinking about that uh, for most of the movie. So that's where I was at, is camped out in those two themes, instead of thinking about AI, because that was more interesting to me than AI.
Well, you know what's so interesting is that I think that that is the issue that I have with this movie is that it weaves those two things together with the AI conversation. And I think it creates this muddling of uh how we feel about the various forces at play in this movie because it's essentially superimposing simulants and AI as being uh, identified with and intertwined with the group of people that are um, either simulants themselves or eventually, in the case of Joshua, become sympathetic to and unite with the simulants and the AI. And so it's kind of the bridge that this film uses to get us to be on board with this idea of AI empathy and seeing a future where we should be working together with AI and robots and things like that. And I think that it's a far more nuanced and complicated uh, uh, dynamic at play with the relationship between human beings and AI that the movie kind of adds in this third variable around those dynamics between countries, our history. Like there's a lot of like Vietnam War undertones in this. Like we have inevitably seen the ways that our country can dominate and go into other countries as well in general throughout all throughout history. But to align simulants and AI in this narrative to the people groups that have been oppressed. Like and this the film is like pretty deliberate, I think, about including a lot of those shots of the villagers and the people in the rural communities and their suffering and things like that. Like,
Mhm.
of course, you as a viewer are like, yeah, I'm rooting for the simulants because they are also positioned in this other third dynamic. So it's kind of weaving in all three of these different tones together in a way that is, I think, serving maybe the narrative that they're hoping to push. But I actually think that those three strands might be a far more complex and nuanced in and of themselves, let alone the minute we begin to like braid them together and then kind of it using those emotional strings that inevitably are going to get tugged on to further a narrative that is a kind of totally unrelated strand.
Yeah, and I think the film tries to take us out of our world and put us into this other version of the future. Like in the first few minutes when it's going through all of the historical footage about how robots and AI were integrated into humanity, basically, I was watching that and going like, oh, that would never happen, are you kidding me? Like, no, that's impossible. And so I feel like there were those little things where it tried to get us to go fully into the movie and erase our own context, but like, you can never do that. You're always bringing yourself and your history and your current context into a film, even when you try and maybe leave that at the door and come in as a blank canvas. It's just impossible to do. And so I feel like, bringing in the historical knowledge that we have of wars that have happened, and then also just current geopolitical tensions too. Like it's a
Yeah.
mess
Mhm.
internationally right now, and we are seeing like countries kind of side with each other, and some of those things are hard to separate from this movie, especially when it's pitted as east versus west is this entire conflict. So I appreciated the movie's attempt to try and get me to go fully into this world, but it just didn't work. I know too much and I brought all of that in with me, which I think made it harder for me to fully engage with some of these pieces that it wanted me to.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you made, which is that we are bringing in so much context that we have into this world. And in some cases, it's we can take those off because that the world that is created is so different from ours, like in Star Wars or and whatnot. But there's a lot that actually is it feels incredibly grounded too in some of the geopolitical dynamics, the dynamics between people groups, the dynamics between humans and technology. Like it's almost as if this film tried to weave too many really big, uh, really intense themes and dynamics between all of these big questions and just like smushed it all together, like tackling any one of those dimensions in of itself is already like a big challenge to guide and bring people into a place of being like, I'm going to surrender to you as a movie and follow along on this journey. But to weave in like all of those three dynamics around geopolitical dynamics, people group dynamics, and then human and AI dynamics, it's just kind of an impossible feat.
It's a
And
lot.
I think it what it ends up happening is that each one of those themes gets pretty muddled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, no, that makes sense to me. And I think that also helps me better understand why I just disregarded the AI piece of it. Cause I'm
Yeah.
like, that's the piece, honestly, of the three that is probably like the least interesting to me. Like
Mm.
I am more interested in like international politics. I am more interested in how different people groups interact with one another. And so, like, of the three, if we're picking like my hierarchy of what I want to focus on, AI is the least interesting. And so that makes
Mm.
sense why I
Mhm.
disregarded it, because the other two are more interesting. So that's what I'm going to focus on, which is probably not what the movie wanted me to focus on. But, here we are.
Well, it's funny. It's possible because those themes are so prominent that it's
Mm-hmm.
it's possible that is also what we're hoping to
Yeah.
communicate. It's so funny because I anchored on the AI theme and then saw the other two as these vehicles for furthering some narrative, some messaging around the AI theme by using these two other aspects. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
funny where we
Yeah.
kind of like, you know, put our stake into and like followed along on this journey, and then everything else was orbiting around that. Like my center of this solar system was the AI, and the other two were like vehicles to get us to this story around the AI. Yours was actually two planets in the circle, and the third planet you
Mm-hmm.
were just like
It
goodbye.
was just a little moon
We're
that
just
was
gonna,
just orbiting.
yeah, kick you off into the solar system. Yes.
Yes. And that's the
Yeah.
great thing about movies. You know, you can choose what you want to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot here. And I think we've seen examples of films that have done a great job around weaving many different multifaceted themes together, but doing them in a way where actually those different themes actually fuel each other and make a kind of beautiful kaleidoscope of ideas and the intersections between those become really interesting. And Tar comes to mind as an example of this. Like there's so many dynamics in that movie too to unpack. And sometimes it doesn't work together. Like when this in this case, it didn't work for me. It sounds like it worked for you when you focused on those 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When I curated my own experience,
It's a choose your own
those
adventure.
themes. Yeah, when I chose my own adventure, I enjoyed my
Mm.
adventure, but I really do think that the film wanted to use those two themes, like you said, as a vehicle to get us into the AI stuff. And I just refused to let my vehicle take me there. And I just stayed in the vehicle in park and just explored the vehicle, not the final destination.
You were like, "Here we are with, like, 2 tires and a plank of wood on top," and you're
Yeah.
just squatted on there,
Yeah, man.
happy as a clam.
Yeah. It was great. Had a great time. Didn't want to think about AI.
Oh my
Nope.
gosh.
I'm fine.
Mm, mhm. The other major aspect of this movie that I think could have made this better is the character development and the story arc. So
Yes, 1000%.
tell me your thoughts about that aspect.
I wanted character development and a story arc.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
I
there's
I
not a lot there.
no,
We've seen this before.
I just John David Washington can do so much more, but he chooses roles sometimes where I'm like, this character just didn't get enough time for us to develop a relationship with this character. So now I'm just following an unnamed protagonist
Mhm.
whom I don't know who they are really. Like, who are they? Who is Joshua? I still
Mhm.
don't know by the end of the movie. And I think we
Yeah.
had this nearly identical conversation when we were watching Beckett, the Netflix movie.
Oh my
Who is Beckett?
gosh.
We
I
don't
had
know.
forgotten. I had erased that movie from my brain. Yeah, but we had the
Yeah,
exact same conversation because
yeah.
he has a name and
Mhm,
nothing else.
mhm. That is all we
Wow.
learn.
That
He is
is
a
all we
video game
learned.
character.
Sure
Yeah.
is. Yep.
Yeah, at least with Joshua, we know that he just wants to find his wife.
He really does. Yes.
That was his defining character trait.
Yep.
That's all I know about his personality.
Yeah.
So he just wants to find his wife.
Yep. That's all we get.
I found myself frustrated with this character so many times because I'm like, this movie is telling me that apparently the stakes of the world are at hand here.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
the only person that can help us is this man. But this man doesn't give a flying F about saving anybody.
No.
So every time he was like, oh, just tell me where Maya is. I'm like, do you not care about the rest of the world, sir? I have some questions for you. So I found myself so frustrated with this character, to be honest. There was a mismatch between the mission of the movie and then the mission of our main character and my mission watching this movie. None of those things were aligned.
Yes, I had the exact same problem.
Okay,
Uh,
good.
the other thing that I wanted, because so again, the only thing that we know about Joshua is I guess he has some like military experience because that qualifies him to do whatever it is he's doing. Okay, cool. And
Mhm.
then his wife. That's it. His weakness is his wife and his longing to be with her. And I really wanted the powers that be to use that against him. I wanted that to be a weakness that was exploited because I
Oh.
think that that would have been so much more interesting as opposed to the bad guys just following him from location to location. Like I wanted there to be a little bit more gamesmanship, like especially if you are as conniving as I think these generals, colonels, whatever their rank is. I think that they were really smart and they can sense people's weaknesses and obviously they have recon on this guy. Why didn't they set this up better to manipulate him better into doing what you want him to do? Like I was so annoyed that we couldn't have been more creative with our bad guys to make our protagonist more interesting. You know, like I just
Yeah.
ugh, it was so vanilla. I was so annoyed.
It was very vanilla. That would have been great because then there would have been at least a purpose to him caring so deeply about
Yes.
finding his wife, and
Yep.
I would have had an entertaining experience because now there's tension
Yes. Yes.
instead of frustration. There's a very fine line between tension and frustration. Tension is fun. We love tension. Frustration is like, I want to shake this character for the
Mhm.
sake of the world and
Yes.
humanity
Yes. Yeah,
and the
there's
simulants, apparently.
yes, for everybody.
Yes.
Everybody in this movie.
Yeah.
We need you to
Yeah.
care about somebody other than your wife. She is important. You can care about her. Please do. That's a good sign. But I need you to also care about literally everyone else.
Well, the other
Just a
interesting thing
smidgen.
is that he finds out some pretty intense revelations about the person that he loved, but, like, no emotion.
Doesn't blink an eye.
No, yeah, doesn't bat an eye.
Yeah.
He's just, "Okay, she is the
hmm
creator of all of AI."
hmm
Casual. I mean,
Yeah.
I know
No
he
big deal.
thought she was great and everything, but come on, that's pretty exciting.
I mean, she is
Kind
Gemma
of
Chan.
terrifying.
So, like,
Yes.
there is that. But yeah, you would expect a little reaction or like a
Right.
little crisis of conscience, you know? Like
Mhm.
just
Oh, no,
something,
yeah, yeah.
something interesting for this character. And it was just
Mhm.
like, "Oh, cool, 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 cool. Okay, yeah, so when can I see her?"
Yes.
Like, "Oh, okay, cool. we're not bothered."
Yeah. I mean, I would love his amount of chill for my own life sometimes, you know? Like,
Yes,
life can be a lot, and if I
it's
could
true.
just deal with life the way that John David Washington did in this movie, man, I would have so much peace. I'd be even keel, cool as a cucumber. The cares of the world just wash over me. Like, he finds out he has a child, no reaction. Stone cold.
Mhm. Yep.
Stone cold.
Yeah.
I mean, you see the emotion later on when they have to separate. So yeah, that was great. That was good. But the minute he finds out that he has that this Alfie, that is the apparently the only thing that can destroy the big bad Americans who want to
Mhm.
destroy all of the rural village, like
Mhm.
that is your child who has something. I don't know. The embryos were given to the simulant and blah blah blah.
Yeah, science.
What? This man should be racked with like
Some
overwhelming
emotion.
overwhelming revelation that he's experienced in a very short period of time.
Well, and it wasn't even like no emotion in a good way, because
Yeah.
sometimes in movies a character doesn't show emotion, but you can tell that there's like stuff brimming under the surface and they
Mm,
can't bring themselves to express emotion. So then their victory in the end is being able to actually come to terms with their feelings and express themselves, and it's a whole beautiful character journey. We don't even
yeah,
get that. It's just
yeah,
kind of like nothingness and then a little blip of emotion at the end.
yeah,
But because he didn't like, and he showed more emotion when he's reunited with Maya in the end, I think, than he did with Alfie. Like, she
yeah,
was the vehicle for him to get to Maya.
yeah.
It wasn't ever really about her, which is weird if that's your kid. And you know, like there's some weird things happening there. And I get it, you're a military dude, you're on a mission, you're focused, but again, he wasn't focused really on the mission.
No,
So I just
he was
I
the
don't get this
worst.
character.
Yeah, he was the worst.
Okay, can I also share the other character that bothered me?
Yes.
Alfie. Uh the actress did a fantastic job. She is a great little actress. She is adorable. She played all the emotions just right. She's wonderful. My issue with Alfie is that she doesn't seem to have a weakness. And that always
Mm.
bothers me with these like superhero characters. I know she's not a superhero, but for lack of a
She
better term,
basically his man.
she's a superhero.
She
So,
we need to recruit her to the Avengers stat.
right? They could use her help.
Oh, yeah.
Uh but we never see her encounter an obstacle that she's not qualified to handle, and that bothers me. We
Mm,
do see her throughout the movie using her powers. She starts small and then goes big. But she never seems to struggle with anything. And that's troubling to me because like we said earlier, tension is good. And so if we've seen her struggle before, if we've seen her fail before, if we see how her powers zap her or drain her of energy or harm her in some way, then there's this conflict and this worry of, is she going to be able to destroy the Death Star or not? But because we've seen her succeed at every turn, it's like, oh yeah, she's chilling, man. There's no problem.
Mhm.
She can take out a
Mhm.
Death Star, are you kidding me? And have no ill effects. I needed her to have a weakness. I needed her powers to like drain her or her to be vulnerable when she's using
Mm.
her powers or just something to make
Yeah.
that whole thing more interesting than it is.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a fabulous point. That's a fabulous point. She is just like father, like daughter, just chilling. Just chilling, rolling her way through this movie.
Yep.
You know, Joshua says, "Okay, Alfie, now's your do your thing." Do a
Yeah,
little
do your
prayer
thing, girl.
hands, little prayer position. Everything bows to her. Wow, must be nice.
Well, and like halfway through the movie, Ken Watanabe's character even says she's not ready for the Death Star. And I was like, oh, okay. Are we going to see weakness? Are we going to learn more about her powers? And is this going to like harm her in some way? And like nothing came of that line. And I was
No.
so annoyed.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, it's so
Which
frustrating.
the byproduct is that there's no emotion.
Yeah.
Which that's this it's half baked. It feels lifeless
Yeah.
because there isn't that feeling of like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm invested in you." Like we don't know
Mhm.
Alfie either. What I wanted
Yeah.
for her is to have an existential, okay, she's very little. But
Yes.
we get these little glimmers of an existential crisis that she's having to figure out and wrestle with, like, what am I? Like, who am I? Am I real?
Yeah.
Am I not real? What does that mean? Like, am I have all these powers. Like, what do I, and uh there's the little moments that this movie like just peppers in there, just like a little sprinkling of existential questions around, I think they're on the bus where they're talking about the idea of an afterlife or heaven and only good people go to heaven. And there's this really cute
Mhm.
line around, she's like, "Oh, I must not go either because I'm not a person." I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting." But they don't really keep digging on that. So I wanted an existential crisis for this very small, tiny human, which is a
Yeah.
weird ask, but I wanted it.
But I mean, honestly, the movie sets it up for that.
Yeah.
She does seem to be questioning who or what she is and how she fits into society. And there's all the layers of she's not a human, but she's not like all the other simulants. Plus, she's a superhero. So there's a lot of things going on in her little tiny person, and she seems to be cool with it all.
Do we need to put her in therapy too, along with the rest of the characters you've thrown into therapy?
Yes, please. I also need to go to therapy after watching this movie.
Yes.
So, just therapy for all. It's
Oh,
great.
yes.
There's no shame in going to therapy.
No.
Please, everyone, go to therapy.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, those questions I think are ones that any adult human and any tiny human all have, which is,
Hmm.
who am I and what's my place in the world? And
Yes.
for her especially to know these powers about her, to know clearly she's grown up in an environment with her mom and she knows that she's been created for something. She sees her face plastered across all of these billboards when she's walking through the city and she knows she's being hunted after. Does that not create some questions? No, she doesn't seem to. The movie doesn't give her the opportunity to engage with those things in a meaningful way. This is where I was really thinking about Blade Runner quite a bit because I think one interesting perspective that I did love that this movie introduces is this idea of, are simulants real or not real? And that was fascinating to me. There's so much at the beginning where Joshua and a lot of the other characters say this line of like, it's not real, it's programming. But we also see later on this idea that's introduced around, the creator puts these human feelings, emotions, genetics, embryos are given to a simulant body, but they have all of the thoughts and feelings and memories of a real person. And we see that this one scene that I really love. This was the one of the bits that I loved about the world building was when, the head of the military from the American side, they put the chip from the man who has just died into a
Hmm.
simulant's body,
Yeah.
and you see that that person, everything about that person, their memories, their desires, him crying after his wife, like all of that is very real. So that reframes everything that we see about the simulants after that. But this idea of what does it mean to be human versus programmed, created versus not? Is AI the next step in human evolution, which is a point that I think some of the rural villagers make and the pro AI side makes in this movie? They see it as the next step of human evolution, or do we see it the way that Joshua sees at the beginning, which is it's not real, it's just programming. They are just created machinery. And there's some shots that the movie also gives us of seeing the stimulants' bodies like being literally made in factories. And so all of that for me I thought was really interesting, but I think Blade Runner does a more interesting job of introducing and grappling with and creating these questions around what does it mean to be human. That whole theme in Blade Runner around you're human because you were born, or are you a replicant that has been given memories by the systems and the powers that be, and what does that mean for your worth and value? Like, do you deserve the same rights to live or to be off the way that a human being does? Like, that's where I wish this movie went, and it has all of the puzzle pieces to do it. The film just kind of doesn't take that additional step forward to really have something interesting to say about those things. It just gives us a spectrum.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting. I don't really know what this is going to sound like a really weird thing to say, but like
I'm
I don't really
ready.
know what the point of this movie is. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a gorgeous artistic expression. And so for that
Mm.
alone, I'm like, yes, okay. You're beautiful. I That was great. But going back to what we were talking about, the themes, like what are you trying to
To say.
say? Because in some ways it's like all of this stuff is leading us to a positive view of AI, but also like the positive view of AI is maybe also trying to get us to think about how like similar we all are, and to like resolve our like human disagreements too. And like
Mm.
I don't know, there seems to be a lot that it's trying to do. And even while I was watching the movie in that third act, when they're going to the Death Star, I was like, why? What are we doing here again? Like, I don't understand the point of of what we're doing here. Like,
Mm.
that was just a lot of my thought throughout this movie, and I
What are we
just,
doing here?
what are we doing here? What is going on? What is the point? What is our mission?
Mm.
Like, I get that we're trying to solve a problem, and we found the secret weapon, but then we change sides, and now we want to destroy the Death Star with the secret weapon.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, cool. Movie's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just
Hmm.
that third act. I was like, I don't understand why we're doing anything that we're doing, but cool.
If we see this through like the traditional lens of the journey of our primary character,
Hmm.
then emotionally, this movie feels like it's about the theme that you really anchored in, which is this person, Joshua, was seeing this group of people as other, and now his growth, his character growth, is that he now has empathy and has joined the side to fight for what he believes is just,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So emotionally,
Yeah.
so you watch this movie emotionally, which is great. Intellectually, this movie feels like it's about what is human beings' relationship with AI and
Hmm.
and geopolitical dynamics and people group dynamics.
It's a lot.
And emotionally, some of those things are connected to the intellectual part of this movie, and then in other aspects it's not. So then I'm like, I don't what is your stance on this very hot button topic right now? I don't it's kind of unclear to me. It seems to be pro AI, but that seems in conflict with emotionally what you're also looking to do as well. So I feel you because I felt the same way, which is I actually don't know what this movie's perspective is by the end of the movie. And I think we feel that way probably because there are many things in contention with each other that there doesn't feel like an alignment and a resolution and like a clarity because they're all kind of nebulously interconnected with each other but not really pointing in a specific direction.
Yeah, and I don't always need there to be, a clear stance from a movie on an issue. Like ambiguity sometimes is real good, but I think because the characters were muddled, the story was muddled, it was very tropey. Like it, the strong suit of this movie is not the script or the story, and so that ambiguity to me did not feel intentional, but it felt like a defect in what I already thought was not a good or a well written story,
Mhm.
as opposed to intentionally there to really make you think and consider all of these complex things that are in contention with each other and make you really examine your own perspectives and come to your own conclusion. This just, it didn't feel like that for me.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's true because the ambiguity is interesting when you've had interesting, nuanced things to say about many sides. And if inevitably this movie doesn't feel like it has those those nuance, it's not playing in the nuance at all. So therefore, the ambiguity is less interesting because the it's fun when there's ambiguity because you've kind of analyzed all these different aspects and nuances and teased them apart, and now you're like, wow, there's so many components to this. How interesting. Whereas this movie's kind of like there's so many components, and I don't really know how they fit together, and now I just am lost.
Hmm. Yep.
Lack of clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not great.
Yeah. Uh, other aspects of this movie that you want to talk about?
One of the AI things that I did appreciate is at one point, somebody, I don't remember who, but basically said that the reason why LA was bombed wasn't because the AI was trying to do something malicious against the humans, but it was a coding error that a human had made. And I
Mhm.
thought that that was super interesting, and I really like that that was included in there, because I think that that's a really
Yeah.
important thing that we are discovering right now, with this rise of AI, and we're seeing how humans have made these things and how human inputs have affected the AI's outputs. And so I think that that is a really interesting thing that people that are way more technologically inclined and way smarter than me need to be talking about and considering. So I appreciated that little line that was included.
Yes, yes. I loved that as well because that's I think a much more grounded view of realistically the relationship between AI and humans and robot and humans is actually that there are going to be the people that have the understanding and control and power over how these things and these systems are programmed and created, the algorithms we create and the biases that are encoded into those, the security checks of those, like all of that, that is where we as human beings have the responsibility. So yeah, you're right. I love that the movie included that aspect into this. So there's just moments that are really great in this movie, like they that line feels like there was real ideas and thought that went into
Yes.
that one line being able to be even thought of to be included, right? So yeah, I love that moment.
Hmm. Yeah, I wanted more of that kind of
Yeah,
thought.
yeah. Me too. Me too. One of the other moments that I loved was when Joshua, at the beginning of the movie or in the first section of the movie, is out doing the cleanup in LA, and he's with his coworker, and they pull body out, a simulant's body out, and it kind of turns back on momentarily and is like um, screeching for their lost loved one or whatnot. It's supposed to be, I guess, those final moments
Hmm.
before the city was bombed, and the girl has this like visceral reaction. She gets really freaked out, and Joshua turns to her and says, "It's not real, it's programming." But I was thinking a lot. It made me think a lot about how we might cognitively know that, but emotionally, when we see something that looks like a human being and has like all of that feeling and emotion that feels so real to us, like it's real to us as a human, and that interplay between that emotion is real, and it speaks to and tugs on all of the same places that we have as a human being. And so that kind of blurry line between when we've created robots and AI to feel human, that the way that we relate to them also becomes incredibly complicated to discern what is actually real versus what is truly programming or not. So I thought that was really interesting because visually and to that, the senses of that girl, that felt real. That felt like a real human being. So that blurry gray area, I think, is really interesting.
Hmm. And I think that the film was trying to like play with that a little bit throughout, because you hear Joshua say things along those lines throughout the film, but I wish that those had been a little bit more intentional, maybe, uh, to really get us maybe more into his headspace, and even those moments of doubt, where he's convinced himself that, okay, this isn't real, almost as a defense mechanism. And then as he's confronted with the reality, like, I wish we had seen that wrestling in him to make not only the character more interesting, but also this world more interesting, and explore that gray, blurry area, which is just fascinating to explore.
Yes, yes. Even his journey kind of warming up to and then finally realizing that Alfie is his son or has
Hmm.
the genetics of his son. Like, that journey was interesting. There's a whole middle section where you can clearly see, um, Joshua kind of softening to Alfie. Like, initially, he just views Alfie as a literally a key to get to once again, to get to Maya, to get to his wife, right? But there's a slow shift that happens where you see his kind of protective instincts kick in, and he talks to, there's a softness, there's a tenderness with Alfie that wasn't there at the beginning, and then finally the full realization that this has all the genetics and is his son. But even in that middle section, like, that journey is really interesting too, and I wish that the film had shown maybe this push and pull between how he emotionally is feeling versus cognitively what he's been told. And I'm sure, being in the military, what has been ingrained in him for so long, and seen more of that tension between those two factors. And so then finally, when we see this emotional like release of, oh my gosh, yes, this is my son, this is everything that, all of the genetics, all of the emotions of who my son is in this simulant's body, like, we can feel the emotional release of that because it's been wrestled with. Whereas it felt more of like a slow, steady climb to that moment.
Yeah, and you don't see that wrestling.
Yeah.
It's He uses, instead of calling Alfie an it, he calls Alfie she in
Hmm.
conversation. And that's about
Hmm.
it. Like, that's kind of the extent of it.
Yeah.
And I just, again, I wish that there had been a little bit more. And you do see him warming up to Alfie over time, but I don't know. I feel like we already have such a tropey movie. Like, let's just lean into that trope, because that will at least set us up for a climactic third act. And so then when he sacrifices himself to save Alfie, then there will be a little bit more there, as opposed to like, oh, all right, cool. Like, I
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I feel if that middle section was stronger emotionally and really showed the emotional journey that they're both going on as they're both getting to know and bond with each other, then when they're ripped apart dramatically at the end, then we as the audience would feel something, as opposed to just celebrating that the Death Star is being destroyed.
Hmm. Yeah. The Death Star.
It's a Death Star.
It really is. Well, even some of the, like, little lasers that they're shooting around, I was like, they're just stormtroopers.
Yeah,
Look at
man.
this.
It's Star Wars all over
It's
again.
Star Wars. And Alfie is Rey, who has just plot armor for days.
Ooh.
Walls of plot armor.
Yeah. Didn't have to do any training.
Oh
Can go
no.
right in. Just is bomb right off the bat.
Do you
Uses
think
the
Alfie
force
is
with
the
no
Force?
problems.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
When Alfie does her little, like, her little hands come together. I think she's using the Force.
She is using the Force. This is a Star Wars story, y'all.
I mean, it was directed by the same person that did Rogue One, so I'm
Mm,
just saying,
okay.
the
Okay.
creator, a Star Wars story. Like
Amazing.
Gemma Chan, like put some of the mitochondria, what? Something, the little
Oh,
special
yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah. Yeah, whatever. Oh, I don't remember what those metachlorian.
Midichlorian, yeah.
Meta,
Mito-
meta,
yes, those
something like
things.
that.
Those little
Yes.
things swimming inside. Yes.
That's what she did. Okay.
Ah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah.
I see. We figured it out.
Oh man. Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts before we wrap up?
Uh okay, so I have two things.
Okay.
First, I just want to give a shout out to Allison Janney, who plays the evil
So
Colonel
good.
lady. So good.
Yep.
I primarily know her as CJ Craig from The West Wing, and she's great in The West Wing, but she plays such a different character in this movie, and I was happy to see it. She was great.
She was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so
Yeah.
fun. I was like, I would
Mhm.
like to see you as a villain more often, please. This was great.
Well, and she does a great job of like as the film unfolds, she turns up the villainy.
Yeah,
Like it's a little bit more subtle at the beginning, but by the end, she's just parading around, barking out orders.
yeah.
It's great.
Oh, she did a great job. And then, okay, so my other thing is I spotted a continuity error.
Ooh, in a movie like this, man, there's things exploding left and right.
Yes. To be fair, it was when things weren't exploding.
Okay.
So it was actually in the scene that you referenced earlier where
Oh,
the dude they inserted the chip into him and he spoke as the other dude.
yeah.
Uh, when they're getting ready to leave, the contraption to like suck his consciousness out is still attached to the dude.
Oh.
And she gets up and starts like walking to the car. Neither of them retrieves it. But then later in the movie, when the detectives come and are looking at it, that device is nowhere to be found.
Why do you notice things like this?
Because
I'm so
the
because you, as they're walking away, you're like, hold on, wait, guys, you forgot something.
that is exactly my thought, because I was like,
Oh
that's a
my
really cool device that probably cost a lot of money to create. Why are you leaving that here? Like, you that will be useful again in the future. Why aren't you taking that?
Oh
So
my
like I was
goodness.
very fixated on this device and why they were leaving it behind, because that felt wasteful when you're here on this like insurgent mission that you're not supposed to be
Yeah,
on.
that's a
Why
very
are you
important
leaving your
device.
tech?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's that.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. This
Thank you.
isn't like a, oh, the napkin was folded and then the napkin
Mm-mm.
was not folded in
Yeah.
the next shot. This is like a vital piece of
Yeah.
equipment. Yeah.
Yep.
Good find. Good find.
Thank you. Thank you. I was making sure that their inventory was fully stocked, and they were not.
My favorite 3 seconds of this movie is
Ooh,
a
yes.
dedicated shot of a monkey pushing the little lever to set off the bomb. I think I audibly giggled in my theater in the back row, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is no one else is laughing, but I'm just." There's a monkey. It was like a full close up, like National Geographic's level of like crisp. I could see every piece of fur on that monkey's body. I have so many questions about how that shot made it in, but I appreciated it.
No, that was great. I loved that.
So good. It does like a little like look to each side and like a, okay, we're doing it. So good.
It's so satisfying. But
Hmm.
like you would imagine that that was intentionally placed in there.
Yes.
And so maybe it goes back to the whole like AI is the next step in human evolution thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I love that. This shot was the key to us figuring out what the point of this movie was. That is
That
the
monkey.
little key that we needed to know.
Yeah, the
Yes.
monkey held all of the secrets.
That's the thesis.
Yeah,
What's the creator about? Let me show you this one 3-second shot.
monkeys.
Yes.
The whole thing, monkeys.
I mean, of all animals, it's a monkey too. The
Mhm.
themes of evolution, I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
yeah,
Metaphorically, it all works.
it does work.
Oh man. Okay, well, this is our review and discussion of The Creator. You can find it available out in theaters. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. Everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you hung out with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about The Creator. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at MoviesAndUsPod or email us at moviesandUspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss the Netflix film Reptile. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week.